When people first hear about short-term rentals, they usually see the exciting part. You see the nightly rate, you see somebody charging $200 or $300 a night, and you start doing the math. $250 a night times 30 days, that's $7,500. But that's not necessarily how the business works. You have vacancies, you have cleaning expenses, you have guests checking in, guests checking out. Questions, cancellations, last minute bookings, weekend bookings, people wanting early check-in, people asking for late checkout. And every time somebody leaves, you're starting over again. Cleaning, inspecting, restocking, getting the property ready, waiting for the next guest. And for somebody like me, that constant activity can be exhausting. I'm an introvert, so I started asking myself, is there another way to make good rental income without constantly turning the property over? That's when midterm rentals started making a lot more sense. Instead of looking for someone who needed a property for 3 nights, we started focusing on people who needed somewhere to live for a longer period of time. 30 days, 60 days, 3 months, 6 months, sometimes longer. And the type of tenant changed too. Instead of primarily thinking about vacationers, we started thinking about people coming into an area for a purpose. Traveling nurses, healthcare professionals, corporate professionals, people relocating, people completing temporary work assignments, people doing clinical rotations, people who need furnished housing while they're in transition. The example you shared highlights this exact advantage. Let's say you have a property available for 90 days. With the short-term rental, you might have 1 guest for 4 days, then a cleaning, another guest for 2 nights, another cleaning. Someone books for 5 days, cleaning again. Then the property is empty for 3 days. Then somebody wants a weekend, then another cleaning. You may have several different people coming through that same property in 1 month. Now compare that with the traveling nurse who says, I have a 13-week assignment. I need your property for the entire 3 months. 1 move-in, 1 tenant, 1 agreement, and potentially 3 months of rental income already planned. That's the type of stability I started wanting. Not necessarily because every month would always be perfect. Real estate doesn't work like that. But because I could reduce the amount of times I needed to refill the property. And every time you reduce turnover, you're also potentially reducing cleaning, restocking, marketing, vacancy gaps, communication, wear and tear from people constantly moving in and out. For me, that was a much better fit. By the way, if you're new here, my name is Linza, and I'm known as the Introvert Landlord. I'm a realtor here in the South Carolina market, and my husband and I have been building and managing furnished rental properties for several years. And yes, I really am an introvert. I don't like spending my entire day on the phone. I don't want to constantly meet guests. I don't want to keep explaining check-in instructions. I don't want 20 different conversations going at the same time. When we started looking at our rental business, I knew I wanted to build something around my personality. Written communication, automation, clear expectations, longer stays, and the right kind of tenants. I didn't want to become more outgoing just because I owned rental property. I wanted to become more strategic. That's really how the Introvert Landlord was born. So if you're a landlord, future landlord, or you have an extra property and you're trying to figure out how to generate income from it without creating another full-time job for yourself, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We talk about midterm rentals, traveling nurses, setting up your property, finding tenants, screening tenants, and building systems that can make this business much more peaceful. We also offer coaching if you want help putting the entire strategy together. Now let me show you why the midterm rental became so important for us. I think there's the assumption that if you move away from nightly rentals, you're automatically giving up all of your earning potential. That hasn't been our experience. The difference is that we're looking at the income differently. I'm not necessarily trying to maximize what I can make tonight. I'm looking at what can this property reliably produce over the next 3 months. That's a different mindset. If I can place a qualified professional into a property for 3 months and have that income committed, I can plan differently. I can manage my expenses differently. I know who is in the property. I know when their lease ends, and I have time to prepare for the next tenant. That's valuable. There is a level of peace that comes from looking at the calendar and seeing that your property is already occupied for the next several months. Instead of who's coming Friday, who's leaving Sunday, do we have a cleaner available, did somebody book next weekend? That's not the kind of calendar I wanted anymore. When we started focusing more on traveling nurses and healthcare professionals, we needed to figure out where those people were actually searching for housing. And that's where Furnish Finder became a major part of our strategy. For us, that model grew far beyond being an experience. For us, that model grew far beyond being an experiment. Across 7 different properties, we've generated more than $500,000 in rental income through Furnish Finder. And here's one of the things I love telling people about that number. Those properties still look almost the same today as they did when we first started. We didn't constantly redesign them. We didn't replace all the furniture every year. We didn't try to turn them into luxury vacation homes. We built them for function. Clean, comfortable, safe, Wi-Fi, utilities, good beds, good locations, and close enough to where our tenants needed to work. Then we maintained them. That's it. We're trying to solve a housing problem for somebody who may be working 12-hour shifts for the next 13 weeks. That's a completely different strategy. Here's something landlords sometimes forget. Think about a nurse coming into South Carolina for a 3-month contract. She doesn't want to move every week. She doesn't want to keep checking Airbnb prices. She doesn't want to wonder if the property is available next month. She wants to get off work, go home, eat, sleep, and go back to work. She wants to know, this is my place for the next 3 months. And if we can provide that stability for the tenant, they can provide stability for the property. That's why I like this model. There's an alignment. I want somebody to stay longer. They want somewhere they can stay longer. That makes sense. This might be one of the biggest benefits that doesn't get talked about enough. Every turnover costs something, even if nothing is damaged. You have cleaning, laundry, supplies, inspection, your time. Maybe something small needs repairing. Maybe you have to replace something. Maybe the cleaner finds a problem. Maybe the next guest is arriving in 4 hours. There's pressure around that. Now imagine going from multiple turnovers in a month to 1 turnover every 3 months. That's a very different operation. And when you have multiple properties, it becomes even more important. Because I'm not trying to create 7 little hotels, I'm trying to manage 7 income producing properties. There's a difference. This is probably the biggest shift. With short-term rentals, you can have a great month, and then you can have a month where you're wondering where everybody went. Seasonality can change, events can change, competition can change, travel habits can change. With midterm rentals, once we have a tenant committed for a longer stay, I have a better idea of what the property is going to produce. If somebody signs for 3 months, I have 3 months of planned rent. If somebody stays 6 months, now I can see even further out. That's the stability I'm talking about. Traveling nurses are a major part of that. But don't limit your thinking. Healthcare includes a lot of different professionals. You also have corporate travelers, people doing temporary assignments, people relocating for jobs. There's a larger midterm rental audience than just one profession. I don't want anybody thinking, okay, I'll switch to midterm rentals and everything becomes easy. No. It's still a rental business. You still need to screen people. You still need clear rules. You still need a deposit. You still need a lease. You still need expectations. You still need to understand your market. That's actually another lesson in the sample. Clear house rules, boundaries, expectations, and deposits were important to create a better rental experience. And I agree completely. The more you establish upfront, the less you have to deal with later. For an introvert, that's everything. Your listing should communicate. Your frequently asked questions should communicate. Your application should communicate. Your lease should communicate. Your automated messages should communicate. The systems do the talking so you don't have to. And I want to be clear about something. This isn't about saying short-term rentals are bad. They're not. There are people making great money with short-term rentals. And in the right market, with the right property and the right personality, that model may be perfect. But it wasn't the model I wanted long-term. I started realizing that maximizing nightly income wasn't my only goal. I wanted consistency, longer stays, fewer turnovers, less communication, predictable operations, and ultimately more peace. Midterm rentals gave us a way to move closer to that. So if you're thinking about making the switch, don't think of it as simply changing your minimum stay from 2 nights to 30 days. It's more than that. You're changing who you market to, you're changing how you price, you're changing where you list, you're changing how you furnish, you're changing how you communicate, you're changing how you think about occupancy. You're no longer asking, how many nights can I book this month? You're asking, how can I get the next tenant, the right tenant, to stay for the next 3 months? If you're tired of constant turnovers, if you're tired of wondering who is checking in next weekend, if you're tired of cleaning every few days, if you're tired of having 20 different guest conversations, maybe you don't need to get out of the rental business. Maybe you just need a different rental model. That was the shift for us. We moved from short-term rental thinking to midterm stability. And for an introvert like me, that changed everything. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. And if you're interested in learning how to turn your property into a midterm rental for traveling nurses and working professionals, we also have coaching available. Less turnover, less chasing, longer stays, more stable income, more peace. That's the introvert landlord way.